ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة، فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي، يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء، يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Inshallah, we'll now have a small speech. So please face the other way, and inshallah, we'll start the program. Please recite a loud salawat. Before we start, I would like to invite Brother Ali Zain to introduce the speaker, Sheikh Hasan. Please recite a loud salawat.
Assalamu alaikum. We'd like to welcome Sheikh Hasan, Hujjat al-Islam, Sheikh Hasan here. Alhamdulillah, as you see, he's young, but alhamdulillah, he's completed a lot of studies, studied with a lot of our maraja. He did his BS in US Berkeley here. Then he went to Qom for 10 years, and he studied under so many maraja, including Sayyid Sistani. And he came back here, and now he's finishing his master, and inshallah, going to continue his PhD. So I'll welcome him with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Please recite a loud salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا المصطفى الأمجد والرسول المسدد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. فأما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم: وقالوا لولا نزل هذا القرآن على رجل من القريتين عظيم أهم يقسمون رحمة ربك نحن قسمنا بينهم معيشتهم في الحياة الدنيا ورفعنا بعضهم فوق بعض درجات ليتخذ بعضهم بعضا سخريا ورحمة ربك خير مما يجمعون ولولا أن يكون الناس أمة واحدة لجعلنا لمن يكفر بالرحمن لبيوتهم سقفا من فضة ومعارج عليها يظهرون ولبيوتهم أبوابا وسررا عليها يتكئون وزخرفا وإن كل ذلك لما متاع الحياة الدنيا والآخرة عند ربك للمتقين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. I decided for the first talk to discuss a little bit our role as Muslims living in the West. So I think there's two extremes, or two kind of ways of looking at it. Some might look at it as being something that's some sort of flaw in that we should strive to move back to our countries, whereas others might view it as if, you know, Muslims here are somehow their faith is stronger because they've dealt with more difficult tests and therefore they're perhaps more sincere. But I think with everything, like this topic, just like anything else, we can approach it very scholarly and examine when it's proper to live in the West, when is it permissible, and when is it not. So the reason I asked this, of course, a lot of us were born and raised here, so it's not as if we decided necessarily to live here. But these laws apply to all. You know, whether someone chose, you know, lived in a Muslim country and moved, or someone is Muslim living here, they can come across certain situations that will determine whether it's permissible or not to live in the West, or, you know, in a non-Muslim country. So I wanted to start with briefly mentioning a masala shar'iyya from Ayatollah Sistani's Minhaj al-Salihin. So this is the 30th masala in his Minhaj al-Salihin. So he mentions the greater sins. So he says, min a'zam al-ma'asi, one of the greatest sins is at-ta'arrub ba'd al-hijra. So at-ta'arrub ba'd al-hijra, in our context today, he explains what that means. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with migrating or not. So he says, وَالْمَقْصُودْ بِهِ الْإِنْتِقَالِ إِلَى بَلَدٍ يَنْتَقِصُ فِيهِ الدِّينِ أي يدعو فيه إيمان المسلم بالعقائد الحقة. So it's when someone moves to a land where his faith will be endangered, essentially, and his beliefs and the proper things that we're supposed to believe can be damaged. أو لا يستطيع أن يؤدي فيه ما وجب عليه في الشريعة المقدسة أو يجتنب ما حرم عليه فيها. So he looks at it from two angles. He says either your faith is in danger, so your belief in what it's essential to believe in will be endangered, or you can't act upon your duties. So one very obvious example would be like for, let's say, for women in terms of hijab. So some places it might be particularly difficult for them to wear hijab, or it could just be social pressure and so forth. So that's one take on it. So he's saying to move, but elsewhere he mentions that, for instance, some of us or some Muslim families might have migrated out of persecution, or they didn't really have a choice. So he mentions in those cases, even if someone is worried about their faith, they're allowed to temporarily move until that barrier, that problem, that persecution is removed, or until they find another option and can move to a Muslim country. And similarly, if someone is just residing in the West, so that's why I want to emphasize it's not just moving to the West. So if someone's residing in the West and they fear, because of the gradual process of being distanced from the adhan and the Quran and all the, hearing these things and being basically uh, having a social environment where Islam is encouraged. If being in such an environment for a long period can damage your faith, then that also one should not reside in that non-Muslim country. Now, for us here who are striving to, by dedicating ourselves to a masjid and to such gatherings, inshallah, this hopefully these won't apply to us. So long as you have confidence in yourself, residing in the West shouldn't be a problem. Um, but what I want to talk about, and I'll put this off towards the end. When can we turn this into something positive? Instead of it just being permissible. As Muslims, we want to take best. We know that our time here is very much. It's very precious, and it's to build whatever we can for ourselves in the afterlife. So for us to just randomly choose one place, or let's say we're living here, and we feel like, okay, it's permissible, but if I was living in a Muslim country, perhaps I could, go to the masjid every day. I could, let's say, study Islamic sciences. I could have other benefits that would raise my iman. So for a Muslim, there must be a reason to choose this over that, when we have the choice, obviously. So not in cases of those who are persecuted, or let's say, those who don't have the financial means to move and so forth. We're not talking about them. So what I want to emphasize, and the reason I read these verses here in the beginning, is the reason we live here should never be for the material advantages. It should never be, even in terms of education, it should never be because of economic advantages. Anything, our first priority is always our religion, right? And for us, or for let's say some Muslims perhaps who haven't lived here, the advantages of the West, it can seem as if they're very impressive, and it seems as if they have this bounty that some of these Muslim lands don't. And so what I wanted to emphasize by this, because this is something that can occur, can come to one's mind. Why are these non-Muslim countries so much more organized? So they have so many other material benefits, societal benefits, elements that seem more Islamic in terms of, let's say, the observation of the rights of other people and so forth. But essentially the material benefits, why have they been so, let's say, call it blessed, just for the sake of argument, and Muslims are dealing with all these problems that they're dealing with? So the verses that I mentioned, when I read these verses, a certain hadith came into my mind, and I later realized that this hadith was mentioned alongside this was mentioned in the tafsir that's associated with Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So I realized that the connection does make sense. So I mean, if I don't want to lose you or anything, but we can go through a quick translation of it, a quick explanation of it. So the verses I read, it starts with verse 31 of Surah Zukhruf. It says, وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا نُزِلَ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ عَلَى رَجُلٍ مِّنَ الْقَرْيَتَيْنِ عَظِيمٍ. So they say, so the mushrikeen say, why was this Quran not revealed for one of these two great personas of the two cities? So according to different tafasir and hadith, it seems that the two cities we're referring to are Mecca and Ta'if. The people in the personalities in question are believed to be, according to that tafsir of Imam Askari alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, Walid ibn Mughira in Mecca, and Urwa in Ta'if, or in another hadith it says Habib ibn Amr ibn Umair. Anyways, so these two mighty, or these not mighty, these two great men, basically rich, So these two men rich. So the question is, why was this Quran revealed to these two rich men? Why was it not revealed to these two rich men? Instead, it was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is their question. This is their thinking. Just to set up the rest of the verses, they're thinking that if the Quran is some sort of blessing, this should go to the individual who is blessed materially as well. Okay. So Allah responds, Ahum yaqsimun rahmat rabbik? Or do they divide? Do they decide who gets what? Who gets Allah's mercy? نحن قسمنا بينهم معيشتهم في الحياة الدنيا. We divide their sustenance in this life. ورفعنا بعضهم فوق بعض درجات. And we raise some in degree, not spiritual degree. We raise some in terms of their social standing over others. ليتخذ بعضهم بعضا سخريا. So some take advantage of others materially, and basically we can benefit from each other, and society functions. That's how society functions. If everybody was a specialist in one thing, we wouldn't have a society. وَرَحْمَةُ رَبِّكَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. And Allah's mercy is greater than these material things that they accumulate. Here's where the discussion becomes very specific to what I mentioned earlier. ولولا أن يكون الناس أمة واحدة لجعلنا لمن يكفر بالرحمن لبيوتهم سقفا من فضة ومعارج عليها يظهرون. So, were it not for the reality that all people would become one, and we'll explain what this means in a bit, that all would become one, then Allah would give لمن يكفر بالرحمن. Look at the language. Let's say lil kafirin. One who denies the most merciful, denies Allah's bounties. So he who denies it, he'll get a lot of material bounties. So you know the value of material bounties now. لِبُيُوتِهِمْ سُقُفًا مِنْ فِضَّةٍ. Roofs made of silver. وَمَعَارِجَ عَلَيْهَا يَظْهَرُونَ. And stairs for them to ascend. These very elaborate blessings, again, in quotes, in quotations. Just briefly, I want to say this ummatan wahidatan. What does that mean? It's said in Tafsir Nur al-Thaqalain that it's been narrated that Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, was asked about this, what this means, and he says that they would all, by ummatan wahidan, that it would mean that they would all become al kufr, that they would all become kafir. In other words, the mu'mineen would not be able to handle this. So this, the fact that they would see the disbelievers, these people who are so unappreciative of Allah's bounties, they get all these bounties, they would stop believing. So that's the weakness amongst in the Muslim community, is that when we see people with these great bounties, we think they must be doing something right, because this is a mercy, right? If Allah is choosing where He gives His mercy, and this is their religion, wait a second, maybe my religion is not right. That's the weakness in our thinking, right? And I want to relate a hadith that is kind of along these lines. In Ilal al-Shara'i, it says, Mansur ibn Yunus narrates that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, said, Inna Allah ta'ala yaqul, لولا أن يجد عبدي المؤمن في نفسه لعصبت الكافر بعصابة من ذهب. So if it were not for my believing servant, Allah says, were it not for my believing servant to find in himself some sort of, he would be bothered. He would feel something. I would cover the kafir, I would cover him in gold. Cover him in gold. So this gold, this silver, this is nothing. It's very easy to give as much gold and silver as he wants. And we see that it wouldn't benefit the kafir at all. It wouldn't benefit this believer to be covered in gold, have roofs of silver. This wouldn't do anything for him. That's why it doesn't oppose Allah's justice to give them these bounties. Um, okay, I think we should move on from that. So getting back to the verses. وَلِبُيُوتِهِمْ أَبْوَابًا وَسُرُرًا عَلَيْهَا يَتَّكِئُونَ. And the doors of their homes and the couches on which they recline. وَزُخْرُفًا, and other embellishments of gold. وَإِن كُلُّ ذَلِكَ لَمَّا مَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا. And all of this is nothing but the provision of this world. Again, in the same context of the Quran, this world is seen as nothing but a vehicle, as a means. That's it. So it takes a very simplistic mindset to view these blessings. If it's just for this world, for the moment, it's like it doesn't really, it shouldn't really register. Like, how is this beneficial to me if it's only beneficial in this world? That's the moment's thinking. That's what Allah is encouraging. لما متاع الحياة الدنيا. It's nothing but the pleasures of this world. والآخرة عند ربك للمتقين. The akhirah is only for taqwa. It's only based on taqwa. It's only based on other verses I wanted to mention in this regard. The same concept of us perceiving the blessings of this world, seeing the material advantages of this world, of us perceiving that as being Allah's favoring that person, and the vice versa being as if Allah has disrespected that person. So there were a couple of narrations that I wanted to mention, but I'll just mention the verse that everybody knows. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانِ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانَنِ كَلَّا بَل لَا تُكْرِمُونَ الْيَتِيمَ. So the first verse says, man, when Allah tests, it says ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ. So Allah tests him by bestowing on him these bounties, these material benefits. فَيَقُولُ, the servant says, رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ. He says, my Lord has been merciful to me. He's been generous. He's honored me. He's honored me. وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ. Same word. There, the first one it said ibtilahu with these material benefits. The second one it says ibtilahu فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ. So he is stringent, or he straightens his sustenance. And he gives him very little, right? So that is a bala, that's a test, and this is a test. إِذَا قَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا. Then he says, Allah has dishonored me. He says, Allah has dishonored me. Right? Since it seems there's time, so these narrations that I want to mention, this is in Al-Kafi, volume 2, page 264. عن محمد ibn Muslim, عن أبي جعفر الإمام الباقر عليه السلام. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. So it says, إذا كان يوم القيامة أمر الله تبارك وتعالى مناديا ينادي بين يديه أين الفقراء. So Allah on the day of judgment calls out, where are the impoverished, where are the poor? فيقوم عنق من الناس كثير. So there's a great number of impoverished. فيقول عبادي. So Allah says, O my servants. فيقولون لبيك ربنا. They say, yes, at your service, Allah. فيقول إني لم أفقركم لهوانا بكم علي ولكني إنما اخترتكم لمثل هذا اليوم. So he says, I didn't make you poor out of any sort of disrespect. I chose that for you for this day. Now you see the benefits, right? I'm not saying we should try to be poor, but when someone is put in that situation where they are poor, there are many benefits. They have less that they're responsible for. It's easier for them to perhaps maintain their humility, right? Proper humility, not being disgraced, being understanding your proper place, right? So these verses and this idea leads me to this hadith that I was mentioned that exists in Tafsir Mansubi al Imam al Askari alayhi salam, It also exists in Kafi, and I found it in Sunni ahadith, and Tirmidhi narrates it. So here's the part that I want to mention, and the essentially same phrase exists in these different books I mentioned. It says لو عدلت الدنيا عند الله عز وجل جناح بعوضة ما سقى عدوه منها شربة ماء. Okay. So it says. Okay. Yeah, this is narrated from Fudail ibn Yasar. He narrates that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said this. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, if the dunya, in Allah's eyes, had as much value as the wing of a mosquito, if the dunya, in Allah's eyes, had as much value as the wing of a mosquito, and this is a sahih hadith according to the hadiths, based on from just as a little disclaimer, the opinions of Rijal are based off of Sayyid Zanjani's opinions. He's the kind of the he's one of the Maraja, and he's he's considered perhaps in history one of the greatest scholars of Rijal. So these are based off of his mabna, his school of thought, because I'm not prepared to give my own opinions on. So he says, if the dunya in Allah's eyes were as valuable as the wing of a mosquito, Allah wouldn't give his enemy. And in Dua Kumail we read Allah's enemies and their traits, and how if anybody has to be punished, it's them. He wouldn't even give his enemy water to drink. Okay, so there's two concepts here. First of all, that the enemy doesn't deserve anything that's worthy, that has any value in Allah's eyes, not even as much as water to drink. The second thing is that the dunya in Allah's eyes isn't even as valuable as the wing of a mosquito. So of course the wing of a mosquito exists in this dunya. So I interpret this as being in relation to the way we view the dunya. In our eyes, how much value does the dunya have? Now, amongst all the things in the dunya, if you take the wing of a mosquito, now we can start comprehending how little value the wing, because we value the dunya. Now, in Allah's eyes, to express this, in an analogy that we understand, says the dunya isn't even as valuable as the wing of a mosquito in Allah's eyes. And if it was, He wouldn't give his enemy water to drink. So, getting back to the main topic, living in the West, being exposed to all these material advantages, and seeing in general, we don't even have to live in the West to experience this. Seeing that the non-Muslim is the one who's embellished in all sorts of material benefits, and if that means that, for instance, their institutions are somehow more respected than ours, because their institutions have more money, they have a better way of presenting. They have, anyways. If any of this occurs to us, that perhaps they're right, or perhaps there's something to their lifestyle that's right, I just want to emphasize that no, because if that were the case, if the dunya did have value, based on these ahadith, they wouldn't even deserve water to drink. Well, I don't want to say they as if everybody's our enemy or anything. I'm trying to express the fact that it's not based on their spiritual level, what they receive from this dunya. So, okay. The gist of the argument is that for us, we have to examine every one of us has to examine, is my faith in danger, and if it's not, again, how do we see the value in living here? Well, this is a topic that I want to get into on Saturday briefly when we talk about the concept of spreading knowledge. But I want to narrate a hadith that Sayyid Sistani, it's written in his book, in Sayyid Sistani's book of, I don't know if you guys have seen the Al-Fiqh lil Muqtaribin. There's Code for Westerners, right? Which is a very good book. It has a lot of good issues that apply, and from what I understand, it's pretty accurate in terms of his opinions. So there's a hadith mentioned there. Now I can't say for sure whether Sistani approved of it or not, but it's an interesting hadith, and it's in Wasa'il al-Shia as well, volume 16, page 188. Okay, so I'll just narrate this hadith and translate it briefly. So Hamad Samandari narrates that he says, قلت لأبي عبد الله عليه السلام, الإمام الصادق عليه السلام, اللهم صل على محمد. So he says to him, إني أدخل إلى بلد الشرك. I enter upon lands of disbelief, or of, polytheists. وإن من عندنا يقولون إن مت ثم حشرت معهم. And he says, those people around me, they say to me, if you were to die there, in those non-Muslim countries, you would be raised with them. So you'll be associated with them in the afterlife, right? قال, so the Imam عليه السلام says, فقال لي يا حماد إذا كنت ثم, says, when you're there in these non-Muslim countries, تذكر أمرنا, do you mention us? Do you mention the Ahlul Bayt? This is something emphasized in hadith that, again, I want to get into a bit later. Just narrating what the Ahlul Bayt have said, or what's in reliable books from the Ahlul Bayt. So long as we mention the source, you say that this is in Kafi, such and such, I'm not saying that this is definitely from the Imam, but relating hadith of the Ahlul Bayt has a profound effect, and it has immense capabilities of both changing us and helping us change others. So it says, تذكر أمرنا وتدعو إليه, and you call people to our state, to the Ahlul Bayt. قلت نعم, says yes. قال فإذا كنت في هذه مدن الإسلام, so when you're here, when you're in Muslim cities, تذكر أمرنا وتدعو إليه, do you do these things? Do you call people to the message of the Ahlul Bayt? قال قلت لا فقال لي إنك إن مت ثم. So when he's in Muslim cities, he doesn't do this. So the Imam عليه السلام says, if you were to die there, in these non-Muslim countries, حشرت أمة وحدك يسعى نورك بين يديك. So if you were to die there in these non-Muslim countries, mentioning the Ahlul Bayt, reviving their knowledge, right? You will be raised as your own ummah, and your lights will lead you. Your lights will be in front of you. So you'll have a very high station. So notice, I think this applies to a lot of us. If we were to be in Muslim countries, well, there's a lot of activity there. There are a lot of people who can take care of a lot of things Islamically. But look at the duties that we find ourselves involved in here. Look at all the benefits of living here, right? So as long as we're on this path, right, and we're staying away from, muharramat, and our beliefs are intact, which, by the way, nowadays, with, all the things out there, I believe requires a persistent sort of research. We need to consistently give ourselves things to think about and to read. Doesn't have to be a lot, maybe just a couple pages a day, but keeping ourselves educated in terms of our own beliefs and ways of defending our beliefs, and defending, if any of us are in academia or anything, you have to be able to defend a lot of historical things as well about Islam and the Prophet ﷺ and the Imams ﷺ. So when we're in these countries, we do things that we wouldn't do back in Muslim countries, in a lot of and based on this hadith, we'll have a very high station, and we'll be raised as an ummah. So in this context, and this is the context we should always be thinking of when we think of ourselves here, because again, the dunya isn't even as valuable, and that it's interesting. That was, like I said, was a sahih hadith. The one. Yeah, I don't want to Yes. That's a Sahih hadith from in al-Kafi. The dunya is not even as valuable. I mean, this is something, that we can really, I think we can contemplate. It's not even as valuable in Allah's eyes as the wing of a mosquito for us to even think about it, for us to ever look at it as anything other than a means. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't, enjoy certain things in the dunya. Obviously, there's certain things like, a certain perfume or whatever, looking nice for your, in front of your brethren and combing your hair. And I'm not trying to encourage any sort of Sufism or anything like that. It's all about how you look at it. All of those things become akhirah. Having a large house to feed a lot of guests, right? So you can have a lot of guests. Or if you have family that comes in, you want to have a room for them. Or you want to do things, you want to do charitable actions with that house. That's no longer dunya, right? But if you have a small house and you strive to have a large house, or in your small house you put up you put up certain decorations that simply for the sake of you want to embellish yourself, and you have no sort of vision. You're not looking at the akhirah. Well, that's dunya. Even if you can have very little and be caught up in the dunya, and you can have a lot and be thinking in terms of the akhirah. It's about our vision, about our mindset. But because, like I said, the dunya has as much value as the wing of a mosquito. The only reason, the only way we should understand our being here as making sense, as people who are trying to build our akhirah and take care of and take best advantage of every instant that we're here, is in the context of spreading the message of the Ahlul Bayt. That doesn't necessarily mean that we go out on the streets. It can be amongst ourselves at first, or it can be in so many different ways. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وجعل Sure, yeah.
Inshallah, we have few minutes, so if you have any questions related to the topic, then we can ask the Sheikh. So we'll ask the brothers, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I can pass you the mic.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
First of all, thank you for your
Sure.
time and your speech.
Sure.
So the question I had to ask in relation to, I guess, living in the West, or maybe even picking to live in a Muslim country. So as I understand, you spent 10 years in Qom. So the first part of the question is, what made you decide to leave, or not leave UC Berkeley, but like move from UC Berkeley to pursue education in Qom? And should Muslims in the West have that kind of a priority to seek knowledge, in a place like Qom or Najaf, in order to gain more knowledge about the Ahlul Bayt and then come spread it here? Or is there a bigger priority for some people to, remain here and, be good Muslims, be good representatives of the Ahlul Bayt?
That's a good question. When I went to Qom, to be honest with you, well, my field was related. Like, essentially, I majored in Arabic, essentially. Because there weren't Islamic studies at Berkeley. So it was Arabic and history. And as I was studying Arabic, and I did that because as a child or before Berkeley, I didn't know how to read Arabic script or anything like that. So when I started getting interested in reading the Quran and so forth, and I wanted to read Arabic script, I was forced to, the option that I knew of was at Berkeley. And so alongside my studies, when I was taking classes, we'd read du'as and ziyarat and Quran and so forth. And I would realize that there were certain rules that I'd come across or certain things that I'd pick up that my teachers didn't really, they weren't aware of. And so if anybody here studied Arabic, and this was, 12 years ago, I don't know how many years ago. So it might be a little more advanced now. I don't know, but they don't really have a good grasp of the Arabic language in terms of for what the context that we want to understand it. So classical Islamic Arabic is very specific, right? It's very logical, whereas the Arabic that they want to promote, and I'm sure some of you go to the University of Texas here, and the authors of Al Kitab, right, Brustad and Al Batal. So if you've noticed in their books recently, they've started. I don't want to go too far off topic, but they've started including dialects, right? And I've read in their works that they were saying that they want to move away from grammar even more. And the amount that they have is basically it's useless for us as Muslims who want to study these classical texts. So anyways, so I realized that if I would ever be able to understand, so my goal was to be able to read Islamic books like tafsir. That was my goal. So I said I can accomplish this inshallah in a year or two. So the first 3 years of Hausa are just Arabic, morphology, syntax, and rhetoric. So sarf, nahu, and balagha, right? But as I completed those, and I was, you have friends who are higher up, and they say, well, you should really do some usul al-fiqh. You should do some fiqh as well. You should do some philosophy. You should do some. I was like, they're right. This is interesting. This is fascinating stuff. The point I want to make is the reason I went initially was I actually thought it was obligatory on me. I thought that anybody who has the means has to go to Qom. Anyways, in other words, if anybody has the financial means and anybody has that disposition, because not everybody can succeed in a scholarly environment like that. It's not a short journey. It's not like a 2-year. Even the 10 years I spent there was not as much as I'd like to. I would have liked to stay more. But I felt that at the level that I was at and the opportunities here, I felt that I could, transmit a lot of the knowledge there, and that, would be sufficient for the purposes in America. You don't necessarily have to have your own opinions in ijtihad to, anyways. So I thought it was obligatory because so you have 2 types of wajib. Well, we have a number of types of wajib, but one of the categories is if we have a wajib aini and kifai. So have you guys heard of those terms? Okay. So wajib aini is like when it's that for that individual. Okay. So in other words, like your salat, dhuhr tomorrow. It's wajib aini because only you can perform it. Wajib kifai means, for instance, la samahallah, God forbid, if someone passes away, a Muslim passes away, and we have to do all the preparations. So if one person takes care of that, then the wujub, the obligation falls from all of our shoulders. So some scholars interpret studying in Qom as being wajib aini. They say anybody who can do it has to do it, right? Whereas most would say no. It's kifai. In other words, if there's enough people doing it, then it's sufficient. The point is this: at that time, when I entered Qom, I think there were 5 students from America, maybe 10 from the whole West when I started in Qom. So either way, I think it would have still even been wajib kifai. There's so few scholars there, so few Westerners. So that's the real reason I went. Like I didn't think I had a choice. Like I thought I had to go. I thought and especially as an native English speaker, I thought there are scholars here, but they can't really, perhaps they can't, cover all of the needs of an English-speaking community here. That's why I went. Now, does that apply to everybody? In terms of the wujub, that's not for me to determine. I don't know, but maybe I can determine it, but I have to, really look into it to see what degree, what do we mean by kifaya, and are there enough people? It's possible that it could be wajib on anybody who's capable of doing it. But the thing about the living circumstances aren't for everybody, obviously, and the studies aren't for everybody. It's not Islamic. It's not like you're just studying Islam. you're studying to become a jurist, right? So you're studying to become a specialist who can derive opinions. So in your core classes, you're not going to be studying tafsir, you're not going to be studying tariq, you're not going to be studying history, you're not even going to be studying hadith in and of themselves. You're not going to be studying just hadith. Hadith that come up in scholarly discussions you'll cover. So you're not going to be studying all those things that we talk about, in masjids and these things that are very applicable, things about akhlaq and so forth. You're not going to be studying those. You have to pursue those on your own. The studies themselves are because it's very much just a scholarly environment now. It's very much just about getting to a goal, which is to build you strong enough to be able to deal with these very complex texts from 1,000-something years ago. It's a huge task. So to prepare someone for that, where he can stand on his own 2 feet, the 20 years that many people spend isn't even sufficient. I mean, unless they're so it depends on the person. If the person sees it in himself, and it's not a bad idea to perhaps check it out or do something in the summer. If someone can do classes in the summer to kind of get an idea for the environment. It's a very particular environment that perhaps not everybody would be able to come to terms with. And the studies themselves, I think one should get familiar with what the studies entail, in the higher levels. After you get beyond Arabic, if you want to really get into it, it's just fiqh and usul. It's very much like, it's almost like exercises of the brain. It's preparing you to be able to think of things in different, it's very technical and dry. I don't want to discourage you. I'm just trying to say it's not what a lot of us might imagine before. It's definitely something to look into. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Sheikh. We have time for one more question, so I'll ask the sisters if they have any question related to the topic, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Regarding your question, they must be doing something right. The question that
Yes.
I think it comes up in all of our minds.
Yes.
It's come up on my mind a lot. So I understand that it's definitely a test. The bounties that they receive, again, but the bounties that the non-believers who, like you said, are unappreciative.
Yes.
They don't even acknowledge the existence of Allah. So it is a test, but at the same time, could it be that they're doing something right? Because as I understand Islam, there are laws for everything, and there are even laws for this world. So if you attend, for example, to your parents, you're going to reap the rewards of that, in this world,
Yeah.
or the next. So if you don't believe in the next world, then you reap the rewards in this world. So that's one point. Another point is, so what about Allah's rahmah? So if Allah says that, if it were that, they wouldn't even have a drink of water. What about the fact that Allah is Rahim?
Yeah. Yes.
Ar-Rahman, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Ar-Rahman.
Oh, okay.
So not
So-
Rahim, but Rahman.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, you're right. Yes,
Thank
Rahman. Yeah. So the two questions are: the first one is, if I understood properly, they must be doing something right to gain these material advantages, because there are certain there's certain processes to accomplishing things in this world, and so they must be following the proper ones. Is that the question? Okay. And the second question is, if Allah is Rahman, why would He not even give His enemy water to drink? Okay. So, as for the first question, they are doing a lot of things right. The discussion is they're not doing things right in terms of their beliefs. So I should have clarified this. In other words, they're not al haq. They're not on the right path. Laysa lil insan illa ma sa'a. So when you strive towards something, you can get that, whether it's in this dunya or there's another verse I can't remember right now. but yes, but may yurid hayat dunya nu'tihi minha, right? So if you want something and you strive towards it, you can achieve it, right? And Allah has created a system of asbab, of means. Things are accomplished through means. There's a cause and effect relationship between everything. That's understood both Islamically and scientifically. So the way to perhaps build the best building, the German architects, are abiding by, that's why their buildings are better. Yes, there's a means to everything. And the reason their perhaps economies are more efficient is because they have, studied economy and worked on it. They have gone through the means to accomplish things in this dunya. That's true. The point that I'm trying to make is that um, that doesn't mean that they're doing anything right in terms of their beliefs, and that there's anything to learn from them in terms of ethics. So if we see these same countries and we look at them ethically, and we look at their values, and we look at the direction that they're going in, and their family life and so forth, we can see that there's nothing that we have to get from them. The only advantages they have in terms of cleanliness, organization, hard work, and so forth, these aren't ethical values. The only reason they employ these is because they like the dunya a lot, and they really want it. If you want to purchase something from a really smart businessman, he's going to seem like your best friend. He's going to smell really good. He's going to look really good, and he's going to sell you whatever he's trying to sell you, right? And he's going to make a lot of money. But if you say, "Hey, friend, thanks. Is it okay if I don't pay you?" His personality is going to turn up. So there's no ethics behind it. He doesn't really care about your well-being. So, just to summarize, there is a means to everything, and they have gone through those means because they really like the dunya, and there's no problem with us doing that for the right reasons. But what I'm trying to say is the fact that they've been able to accomplish this, because even accomplishing that, even the fact that in terms of their these require blessings in terms of thoughts. Everything is a blessing from Allah. All of these blessings, because of how much they wanted the dunya, Allah gave it to them, and then they accomplished it. And that's why words like ni'mah and ikram and all this stuff come for the dunya. But that's not the real ikram. That in Allah's eyes, that value and those blessings, those are not the real blessings. Those are for the dunya. And those are only blessings when they're used towards the akhirah. And that's the kind of I don't know, did I answer the? Okay. And as for the second one, Allah's rahmah. So again, Allah's rahmah in this earth. In other words, the way I understand this, it says if the dunya has value in Allah's eyes. Again, value, from my understanding, is in the akhirah. So if the dunya had some sort of merit that you achieved, because any sort of the thing about the akhirah is that the reason it's the akhirah and the reason that Allah doesn't give His enemies things, it's not like Allah is not generous enough to give it to them, is that it has to be based off of merit. You have to earn it. That's the specific thing about the akhirah, and that's why man can reach stations that's different than what angels can reach, because of man's free will and because of his irada and his will, like striving towards Allah. That's what gives it a very specific type of value. That's what the akhirah is. So the point is, in Allah's eyes, well, He gives, disbelievers or enemies or so forth, He gives them water. He gives them lots of water. And He's Rahman. But it doesn't have the merit that if it entailed, He wouldn't even give them this water to drink. So again, looking at it in terms of, if He says, لو عدلت الدنيا عند الله جناح بعوضة, so if in Allah's eyes it was as worthy of a mosquito's wing, So in other words, if it had any worth, again, Allah's vision, Allah's mind, these aren't the proper words for Allah. The thought that Allah wants us to achieve is that the only thing that has any value whatsoever is the akhirah. So this doesn't have even the wings, a mosquito's wing of value. If it did, He wouldn't give him this water. So again, value goes back to the akhirah. That's the way I understand it. I don't know if that, yeah.
Inshallah, thank you, Sheikh Hasan. We'll conclude the program with ziyarat, salawat.
It's fine. My mouth's a little dry.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا سيد المرسلين. السلام عليك يا خاتم النبيين. السلام عليك يا خيرة خلق الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على الصديقة الطاهرة. السلام على فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على أمير المؤمنين. السلام على وصي رسول رب العالمين. السلام على